Godzilla is one of the fictional characters with the most films to his credit. A few weeks ago we brought you a video talking about the cancelled Godzilla movies where we talked about the plot of these discarded projects, but since there were many of them that we did not mention, here we bring you 10 cancelled Godzilla movies Part 2. 11. The Volcano Monsters. The Volcano Monsters would have centered on an American paleontologist and Japanese scientists who stumble upon the frozen bodies of a T-Rex-like creature and an ankylosaurus within the depths of a volcano, before they accidentally wake up in San Francisco. The film was to be distributed by the now-defunct American production company, ABPT Productions, in 1957. However, the company closed before production began, and the Godzilla and Algunos suits were lost, so production was cancelled early. To start filming, despite all the production problems, some elements of the Volcano Monsters were used in Godzilla, King of the Monsters, the second King of the Monsters film, such as the confrontation of Godzilla and Anguirus. 12. Godzilla vs. Mecha Kong. Long before the success of Godzilla vs. Kong in the Monsterverse, Toho's King Kong vs. Godzilla proved that the battle between giants was compelling entertainment and had great potential to be a hit. The unmade 90s film Godzilla vs. Mecha Kong would have been a reboot of the original 1963 film, but with a robotic King Kong instead of the classic giant ape. However, Toho couldn't get the rights to use King Kong or even a mecha version of him, so they scrapped the idea and reused aspects of the script for Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. 13. The Return of King Ghidorah. The Return of King Ghidorah was supposed to be a direct sequel to the successful Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, and would have seen a space monster much like King Ghidorah ravaging Japan, thus forcing its citizens to rely on Godzilla to stop him. For unspecified reasons, Toho abandoned their plans for the Return of King Ghidorah and instead made Godzilla vs. Mothra, which had a bad reception. Perhaps fears of repeating the same path motivated Toho to abandon the Return of King Ghidorah, but the status of Godzilla vs. Mothra being one of the worst films in Godzilla history suggests that the studio should have gone ahead with the film starring the three-headed dragon. 14. Godzilla x Varan, Baragon and Anguirus, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. Planned to debut in 2001, this film would have shown Godzilla facing his first rival, Anguirus, who would be helped by Varan and Baragon. While Godzilla would be a villain in this installment, Varan would be represented as a god of the air, Baragon would be the god of the earth, and Anguirus the god of the sea. Together, these three guardian beasts would face the recently resurrected Godzilla. Although the premise sounds interesting, Toho decided to make Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, because Mothra and Ghidorah were more popular and much more profitable monsters than Varan and Baragon. 15. Godzilla vs. Astro Godzilla. Godzilla vs. Astro Godzilla would have seen the titular kaiju fight a clone of himself with insect traits that could command an army of mutated dragonflies and other monsters to wreak havoc on Japan. Additionally, the plot would have focused on Astro Godzilla attempting to kill Godzilla before kidnapping his son and making him part of his army, thus becoming the new king of the monsters, but the idea was scrapped for unknown reasons. Despite the lack of production details, concept art and designs exist for a metal Godzilla capable of turning into a jet, which allowed many elements from the film's first draft to be used to create Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. 16. Godzilla vs. Red Moon. Godzilla vs. Red Moon would have been a collaboration between Toho Studios and Tsuburaya Productions. The plot would follow a strange kaiju that emerges from the surface of the moon and plans to attack Earth. Upon reaching its destination, the creature is sighted and named Red Moon. Almost simultaneously, another kaiju appears on nearby Habu Island. This new monster would be known as Erebus. The Japanese Self-Defense Force concludes that the two monsters must be brought to each other in the hopes that they will kill each other. The plan to lead them to each other is a success, however. Instead of fighting, the two monsters mate, and Erebus and Red Moon are revealed to be female and male, respectively, of the same species. Erebus then gives birth to Hafun, a third kaiju of the same species. Having sensed the two from the beginning, Godzilla finally arrives and fights the two kaiju, emerging victorious and bringing peace back to Okinawa. In the film's climax, Godzilla would forgive Erebus and let Red Moon escape back to the moon. Unfortunately, it is unknown why this plot was scrapped, and there really isn't much extant material from the production of this project. 17. Godzilla vs. the Space Monsters, Earth Defense Directive. this film would have shown Godzilla, Algunos, and a kaiju known as Majin Tuol, fighting King Ghidorah, Gigan, and the new enemy, Megalon. The three evil monsters would be controlled by an alien brain named Miko to attack Earth. This script also mentioned a theme park and Godzilla Tower, which Gigan mistook for the real Godzilla in one scene. King Ghidorah, Miko, and Majin Tuol were scrapped, but Megalon would be retooled to be the main villain of Godzilla vs. Megalon. 18. King of Monsters, Resurrection of Godzilla. King of Monsters, Resurrection of Godzilla was an unrealized proposal for a new Godzilla film to be released in 1997. The film, which was to be directed by Jun Fukuda from a script by Yuzo Nakanishi, would have revived the Godzilla series after its 9-year hiatus that began after the release of Terror of Mechagodzilla. As you might imagine, some elements of this story were reused in The Return of Godzilla in 1984. For some reason, production was abandoned and the writer-director-producer team ended up working on the war in space instead. Still, elements of King of Monsters, Resurrection of Godzilla would end up resurfacing in later proposals, specifically the concept of a Godzilla solo film in which the protagonist kaiju is once again a villain, attacking a nuclear power plant and being led trap on Mount Mihara. These elements would be key in deciding the direction of the final outcome of Tanaka's series reboot plan, The Return of Godzilla. The Shockirus monster may also have originated from the creature called Shockula from this draft, although only one appears instead of many, and it is a giant sea louse instead of a giant tick. 19. Operation Robinson Crusoe, King Kong vs. Ebra. Following the success of the King Kong animated series, Rankin Bass approached Toho with the rights to Kong to produce a film based on the series. Toho began production on Operation Robinson Crusoe, King Kong vs. Ebra, but Rankin Bass rejected the script as it did not properly adapt the series. However, rather than scrap the script entirely, Toho replaced King Kong with Godzilla and slightly altered the film to become Ebra, Horror of the Deep. The plot would follow a group of boys who arrive on the coast of Devil's Island, where a terrorist organization plans to alter the seawater. The organization, Red Bamboo, would enslave the natives of Infant Island to help them, but the natives awaken Mothra to rescue them, while the castaways find King Kong in a cave on the island. In addition to the fight between Kong and Ebra, the plot mentions that there would be a slight struggle between Kong and Mothra during the final moments of the film. 20. A Space Godzilla. A Godzilla from Space is an illustrated story that was published in 2 parts in Starlog magazine in 1979. It is based on an idea for a new Godzilla film that was proposed to Toho, but was never produced. The story was originally created with the intention of being the 16th Godzilla film, for a possible release in 1979. Everything would start in Arizona, where strange signals coming from a dark nebula are detected. Meanwhile, Godzilla washes up on the shores of Japan, dying of diabetes. The scientists manage to examine the monster's organs, including its brain, and after an attempt to psychically communicate with the brain, it is discovered that Godzilla is actually an alien creature named Razan, comes from planet Godzilla, and is pregnant. Against the protests of the humans, the monster's body is transformed into a rocket to send her and her unborn child back to their home planet. Once there, Razan and his daughter Lilin are reunited with Kunin, Godzilla's husband. Years later, their home planet would suffer an attack by an alien race known as the Sunirians, a species of half-human-looking creatures. Kunin and the now-adult Lilin would face the Sunirian general, Gamani, to defend the planet and ultimately emerge victorious. Taking into account the surreal plot that breaks with all known Godzilla lore, it is not surprising that this film has never been released. For now, that's all for this video. If you remember another discarded film that we have not mentioned in these 2 videos, let me know in the comments box, because your ideas could help me bring you a 3rd installment of this saga. This is the Zilla channel and we will see you in the next video.